Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Monday edition of the GenAI News Briefing brought to you by our analysts here at GAI Insights. As always, we will go through the news that broke recently and let you know whether it is optional, important, or essential to tune into. We have 5 articles to go through today. We've got a couple of use cases in financial services that we'll talk about, and we will discuss some new research that says that it helps LLMs self-improve without outside input from humans. And what else do we have? A little commentary on what's been going on lately in terms of the move toward productization as opposed to focusing on just what's the latest model. So let me bring our first article up. Ankaj, kick us off.
Thanks, David. So the first one that we have for today comes from DBS. So DBS has rolled out a GenAI assistant for customer service teams.
Yes, CBS actually interviewed their chief AI officer a few years ago, and they are definitely all in on AI and use it a good amount. Who's got this one? Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, so just in quick summary, DBS, this Gen AI assistant they're rolling out, they've built it in-house, and basically it can help with some of the standard use cases we often see, right? It can provide summaries after a call. They can help retrieve information from a knowledge base. Pretty standard LLM use case in terms of what we typically see in terms of these things helping like customer success or customer service workers. So I gave it an optional. It's cool they're doing it. It's nice to note that they're building it entirely in house, but I didn't see anything really here that was innovative or earth shattering.
Yeah, as I said, I'm not surprised that they're doing it in house. They have a pretty significant staff there that works on their AI projects. Any other thoughts here, crew?
I also thought it was optional. I think it's interesting, though. This is the largest bank in Southeast Asia, one of the largest banks in Asia. They've got over 700 billion, in assets in Singapore dollars, which are about, 75 cents a piece in US dollars. So, I mean, this is a significant bank. Typical Singapore, right? Bleeding edge, using, the Western stuff. I'd be really interested to see what they do with the Chinese models and if they want to continue to use Western or U.S. models, but or Western or Eastern models. But yes, and it's also not in production yet. Like, we will give it to you later.
Oh, really? I didn't notice that. I thought it was in production, and they were saying that the agents were pleased with it, etc. But maybe it's just a small pilot.
Yeah, they did a pilot.
Yeah, pilot.
Pilot. Okay.
No, but in general, it's operating with 25,000 people on it. Yeah, DBS Bank is very innovative. When I lived in Singapore, they were offering services that I couldn't find anywhere in the Western world. So it's certainly the bank to watch.
Yeah.
But also for me as well.
They will be a leader.
Singapore's a great example for those philosophers in Silicon Valley who are starting to think that we had to have a post-democratic government run by elites. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah. All right. We'll go optional, but kudos to DBS for staying in the forefront of technology. All right. Next one, please.
The next one comes from Morgan Stanley. So Morgan Stanley had launched a GenAI use case sometime back. Now they have come up with another one, and it also talks about some of the strategy around it.
Yeah, they've mentioned a bunch of different banks here and how they're approaching their decision in terms of building, buying, or modifying. What do you think, Luda?
I rated it as optional, but want to stress. So Morgan Stanley essentially offers a helper to their agents that work on advisors, financial advisors that work with customers. So it summarizes calls and weaves the 3 platforms together, which is interesting, in a customized way. So they built an agent that is homegrown. And So it's they record in Salesforce, the Zoom, and their own databases, right? So it's an interesting case study, if you will, and it summarizes, I think, a trend that is happening, that people are tending to do it custom internally. So it's not confirmed yet, but it's a very interesting trend.
Yeah,
But for me, actually.
yeah, their language here, I thought was a little um, off of how we would describe like custom versus not custom. Like I think they're using OpenAI, right? And then they're adding their data to it. So it's semi-custom, right? It's kind of, they're still using off-the-shelf models here for the most part, as opposed to, building something of their own or taking an open source model and like customizing the heck out of it. But that's just a small side note. Anything else, folks, on this one?
But what is important, David, they've customized how it's used, and between they focused on workflows and customized and operationalized it for their specific how they're using these tools. And rather than buy something that and retrain everybody, they said, okay, we're using these tools. How do we use LLMs to help us with that? So that's the difference.
Yeah, and I thought it was an interesting point that they made in terms of, a lot of applications have capabilities built into them now, right? So you can use AI with Salesforce, you can use it in your Microsoft Office, etc. And they talked about the reason that they pulled something and customized it was because it could be centralized, right? Rather than having a person have to learn how to use each tool in each application. And also, then all their information and data is kind of like in one place rather than scattered across these. So good point, right? Every organization is going to kind of face that. Any other thoughts, Adam, John?
No.
All right, we'll go optional. It's Financial Services Day so far, but I think we're moving on from them now. All right, here we go. Ankaj, next one.
So the next one is around recursive introspection. So as David mentioned earlier, this research paper is around how agents can self-improve without human input.
Yeah, it looked really interesting, and then I was kind of surprised when the percentage increase in improvement was, I think, only like 16% or something. But the method seemed pretty interesting. What did we think about this one? Oops, I lost my spreadsheet. This is John. John.
Yes. Yeah. I rated this one as optional. This is a lovely new model tuning technique or training technique where the model basically understands how to evaluate its output and then comes up with a set of math to allow it to, once it has flagged something as incorrect, then improve its ability, to take another set of attempts at it for the self-improvement of, as you say, 16%. Ankash, if you could click on the PDF itself, that would be great. But I rated this as optional because I think it's early days. And just scroll down, if you will, down to the first, that illustration there. Its ability to essentially recursively inspect its model. Early days. I'm not convinced of this line of research compared to like multi-expert models, having it within the model to reflect on itself as opposed to an outside expert, critiquing it. I don't really see how much different that is. In a certain way, it's almost like if you think of the outside expert as a subroutine, it's like a subroutine within a larger program. So anyway, interesting, optional.
Yeah, I would rate it optional still because it's early, but I would argue that the technology they're using and the angle that they're deploying is essential. If we ever are interested in getting to general intelligence, this is the path. You need to get the models to reason and get themselves out of making errors and self-improve, look at themselves a different way, right? That is not done, but it is in the right direction for sure. And this is a necessary component, absolutely critical component for LLMs to have.
Yeah, I agree in general with what you're saying, Luda. It strikes me that the fact that it's within the LLM as opposed to a multi-expert model, to me, is a distinction without a difference.
Yeah, but John, you will have to have both. You will have to have the model trying to reason it out within itself and say, aha, I did 2 of these mistakes and I can next time not make it. With the experts telling it more stuff to make it even better next time. So both are necessary if we're ever going to get to general intelligence.
Yeah, it's not clear to me, and I'm certainly not deep enough in the math. Not clear to me that a recursive model is as good, or as a multi-expert model, it might be drawing from another set of data and another set of capabilities. There's that recent paper that talked about how models break as they deal with synthetic data. As they generate, as the web generates more synthetic data, the models will collapse. And we reviewed that one, and this to me is in a similar vein, right? Self-improvement, self-reflection. I would think that the multi-expert model over time would be superior, but whatever. I agree with your general point.
But if you were able to get the capability in one model, I mean, your whole architecture would be less complex and things would be less expensive. I mean, it feels like this would be the better path were it possible. Although if you read Gary Marcus's longer newsletter that he put out this weekend, he thinks this is impossible still, no matter what. We will need.
Why is it better? I mean, that's like saying I wish my liver ran my whole body.
It's better. It would be better for the 2 reasons I just mentioned.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Architecture and potentially less expensive.
I don't believe either of those are true. Architecture is not necessarily an integrated architecture is more complicated to deal with, and it's not clear to me at all that it's less expensive than a multi-expert model. A modular architecture that has multiple hunks of software in it's way easier to manage than a big complex model.
So, John, another point for me to add, it's when you are, so RAG is similar to an expert, right? So you're feeding the model specialized knowledge for this to reason better. And we know RAG works better, but the model still makes mistakes. So you wouldn't be able to avoid the model to look at itself, analyze what it has done, and improve on it. So this is as I said, a critical, necessary component going forward. So not to exclude experts, but experts do not give it some handle to improve, but not, it wouldn't do it without its own ability to self-reflect. And that's what this whole article is about. However, it's so early, and if you look at the end, right, when they say the gaps, that what needs to get done, they had computing power limitations, so they only ran it for 1 iteration. So this is early. But in our day and age, when OpenAI and folks like that take the research off the shelf and then push it, this can go into a real operational model in a couple of months. So even though it's optional, I think it is a noteworthy article in my book.
One of those ones that we discussed quite a bit for an optional. You've been quiet, Adam, though. I'm wondering how you fall on this compared to John and Luda.
I don't know. I have nothing to add. I think it's optional news. It's an interesting approach. I can't really weigh in on what's going to be the more efficient or the more cost-effective or less complex, whether it's internal or an outside expert. In some ways, what I did note, it seems a little bit sort of like a generative adversarial network, a GAN, except it's its own adversary, right? That's sort of how I thought of it, which is novel, and to internalize that makes a lot of sense. The recursive aspect of it, as IT Insurance Guy says on the comments, there is this a form of common sense, right? When you're sort of evaluating your own opinions, right? And so I appreciate the approach, and I hear what Luda's saying. Within months, yeah, people are going to start applying this, but at the moment, it's I'd say more theory than practice, so it's still optional.
Yeah, definitely early. All right, good discussion, all. We will mark it optional, and we will move on to our next piece on Kaj.
Okay, the next one comes from Snowflake. Snowflake is now using AI 21's Jamba Instruct model to help enterprise decode long document.
Yeah, this was one of those articles that after I read a few paragraphs, I started searching around to see, is this sponsored content? Because it was so rah-rah about not Snowflake necessarily, but about AI 21's model. But it did help me learn more about it because I actually didn't know too much about that model. What do you think, Adam?
So I considered it optional news. Basically, Snowflake currently integrates with quite a few different models. They work with Google, Meta. They have their own model, Arctic, and so they're adding another one to their coffer. The real benefit here, this Jamba Instruct, as it's called, first AI 21 produced Jamba, which was a new model, and then they made Jamba Instruct, which was basically a cleaned up version of it on guardrails, so that it was more, I guess, palatable by enterprise. And that's what Snowflake has now integrated. The big deal with it is it has a relatively large context window at 256K, and a lot of the documents for enterprise can easily exceed 100 pages, and you need that large context window to be able to ingest the entire thing at once. So I can see where for Snowflake and the kind of data they deal with, this is strategically a good move. And it's in many ways just another partnership announcement, another, as I said, LLM within their coffer. It's kind of incremental change. So I'd consider it optional news.
All right. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, definitely optional for me too. I think it's interesting to see who's going to have the market power here, right? And one thing I think is clear is that people who have existing customers, aka who have distribution already, are really in a good spot. And these folks and Databricks and others are trying to. I think of it as, in traditional economic terms, as forward integrating into the model environments, if you will, which draw upon the data solutions. So it's quite a dynamic time in terms of who's going to own the marketplace. Own is too strong.
Who has the customers, but in both of those examples, more so, who has the customers with the data, right? That's for Snowflake and Databricks. That's the case.
Yeah, and it's interesting. They're building platforms with capabilities to actually that sits on top of all these models, right? To take an application and test it for performance, for cost, for whatnot, which one to use. This is pretty powerful. So I think these both Databricks and Snowflakes are offering something that is very important for the enterprise users.
And it's a phenomenal segue to our last article as well.
So are you advocating for important, Luda, instead of optional?
I was optional, but this is an important statement. If you don't know it, you better learn it. In other words, if you're trying to look for building an application, you should look at both platforms, with Databricks and Snowflake, and then evaluate the models through them.
Yeah, I was on the fence of optional to important myself.
Same. Maybe we should do it important with this trend, because I think with this capability, because for our audience, especially if you are in evaluation model mode, it's an important message.
All right. I can support important. Important it is.
All right. Hey, you're not the moderator today.
No, I'm talking about for me.
Okay. So we will go important on that point specifically and note that in the newsletter, but we will do important. I like that thought there. All right. Next one.
The last one for today comes from The Verge, and it talks about the latest Meta 405 model release and how it is changing the war for AI from AI models to the products they power.
Yes, that pretty much says it all about what the point was here. What do you think, John?
Yes, I just thought this was important. The reason for it is not that there's new news in here, but I thought it was a nice short analysis of some of the dynamics of the open models versus closed. The same issue we are just talking about with A21 and Snowflake. This kind of what's this going to shape up as? And as the AI leader, I think I need to have a point of view as to what possible futures are for my supplier base. And I think this is informative to that point of view. So for those reasons, it's not badly written. It's short. I know you folks like short things. I do too. I'm just being a jerk. So with that, I think there's some good, important opinions in this thing put together in an easy to consume manner.
All right. What the rest of you think?
From the enterprise leader point of view, I think it's very optional. What the message is kind of, look, the fight on the models is not over yet, but the whole fight is shifting into the application layer. There's no new message here. This is true, has been true, but it's maybe more true now. So I thought it was really optional.
Adam, break this tie.
Yeah, it seemed pretty Captain Obvious to me. Honestly, as I read it, it was like, It was like it was sort of. It didn't provide any thought leadership or any real insight into anything new. It just sort of stated a bunch of facts. So I didn't get a lot of value out of it, and I wouldn't ask someone to spend their time reading it.
And not facts, like opinions, right? So it's
fair.
Yeah, I mean, that's, as I said, there's not new facts here, but there are more than facts, right? He's talking about the fact that, or the opinion that frontier models will continue to develop and as move to the application layer. So I think there is some analysis here, and not a lot.
Yeah. I mean, there's maybe a message here that,
it's the subject of the article.
Yeah.
So you don't have to read.
The message is, model capabilities are converging a bit, right? And so it's not as big of a deal of like what you're going to pick anymore as opposed to what you're going to do with it. But yeah, we already kind of knew it was moving in that direction at some point. So I'm going to side with the optional crew. This one and go optional, John.
All right.
David, one more point. It talked about a little bit about what would happen with all these model providers like OpenAI for banking on the consumer side and the revenue coming from consumer side. What would happen when the model kind of flattens a little bit and they're starting to, and that revenue might go down? So that was an interesting question, but it's still kind of, optional.
Yeah, OpenAI needs to start moving a little bit faster in their productization if they are to survive, given where their revenue is coming from right now and how much their expenses are. So it does note that as well. All right.
Well, you're just making my point. I just want to say we're wandering into the dangers of democracy. Okay.
It was 2-1. Okay.
Sounds important to me.
All right. Where did we land today? I think we only had one important out of the bunch here, which was surprisingly, the Snowflake article, but it was for the very specific point in there that Luda astutely points out, which is the ability to evaluate your models if you use Snowflake. Everything else was optional for today. And tonight is our learning lab featuring our own Adam Rappaport here. Do you want to share what you'll be talking about?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to be doing a custom GPT.ai showcase. So we're going to talk about the recent benchmark I performed, look at some mini gains, and actually check out the chatbot that apparently just went live on our website as well today. So tune in for that. I believe it's 7 p.m. Eastern.
All right.
On the chat, great job.
That's what, 9 o'clock, 9 a.m. Melbourne, is that right?
Yep, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
9 o'clock tomorrow morning for those of you on the correct side of the planet?
7 p.m. Eastern for the rest of us here on this side of the world in summer. You're in winter, aren't you, right now, Adam? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
you can see the hoodie I'm wearing. Right? It's cold here.
yes. So the link to the meetup tonight, I believe it's been posted on LinkedIn. If anybody could drop it in there quickly, have it on me. Please visit YouTube for the Dr. John 5-minute shorts that we've been putting up, which are super interesting, and lots of other content, including our past learning labs, past shows that you're seeing here. And otherwise, enjoy the light reading day and have a great Monday.
Bye, everybody.